My system ran away. I don't know what it is.
Sorry to our YouTube followers.
See if the mic is working.
How about now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. We are on to agenda item 28, Colorado Water Plan Grant Funding Discussion. Lauren.
Yes, thank you. This is Lauren Riss with CWCB staff. This is agenda item 28, and the purpose of this agenda item and staff recommendation is for the board to consider what we do with the results of Senate Bill 212, which, as we've talked about a number of times in this board meeting, has, for the first time ever, given CWCB general funding to support the Water Plan Grant Program. So that's $8.3 million that we have been awarded that must be spent within the next 3 fiscal years. We've talked about the sports betting bill in Director George's report and Director Mitchell, so I'm not going to go into that, but I think that's part of the general context that we're having this conversation, is knowing that there is going to be a concerted effort to get the CWCB more funding for water plan implementation. We have this general fund addition supplement to our water plan grant implementation program that that we, I think, feel a real responsibility to be good stewards of that funding and to put to good use. And so this conversation with you all is to get some direction about how that funding is allocated. Senate Bill 212 did put the criteria and guidelines of the water plan grant program into statute, where it currently did not have a statutory authorization. We had criteria and guidance that we developed as staff, but that is now, I think with some small semantic changes, been lifted in its entirety and put into statute. However, what that bill did not do was allocate that $8.3 million among the 3-year periods that we have authorization to spend, and it also did not determine how we should spend that amongst the water plan grant categories. So our staff recommendation to you all is to use that funding similar to what we have done with the water supply reserve account in the past, and use that as a supplement to bring the total grant funding up to $10 million for the next 3 years. And the caveat there is that in order to give the board some flexibility and not knowing what's going to happen with the sports betting ballot initiative or what grants we'll get in the door for this next grant cycle in the next fiscal year, to give the board some flexibility to potentially release more funding at the September Finance Committee meeting once we have passed the August 1st grant deadline and we see what has come in the door. So in a way, I'm seeing this as an opportunity to kind of put a challenge out there to our community to give us your biggest and your best projects, and to show us that there's a need to release more funding. Given that we really have a pretty small sample size data to make this determination, I did pull together some, pretty basic statistics over the past couple of years and what we've seen. And so generally, up on the slide here, I have the total requests that we've seen come in the door. The blue bar is what we saw in 2017, and then the orange is this current fiscal year. And so you can see 3 of our 5 grant categories in the second year did see an increase in funding, with the exception being engagement and innovation, and then water storage and supply. And I think for the latter, for the water storage category, the discrepancy there is that in the first grant year, in the first cycle, we were seeing the sunset of the dredging grant program. And so we had a couple of big dredging projects come into the water plan grant bucket that requested. There were 3 dredging projects, each requested between $1 and $3 million. And so I think that's what accounts for that initial bump in requested funding that we didn't see play out in this next year. And then as far as the engagement and innovation grant bucket, I'm just speculating. Ben Wade might be able to talk a little bit more about why we saw a decrease in requested funding. But But my speculation is just that that's an untraditional CWCB customer base, and that really requires some extra love and attention to get some innovation grant requests out there, and that there's just a smaller applicant pool to start with. So the other slide I wanted to just show you, I know you have some numbers in your board packet as well. Just to go through and see the comparison between the different categories. Overall, the past 2 years, we saw an oversubscription of about 56% of the funding that was available. We had a combined total of 16 million, 9 million the first year, and then 7 million this past year. We did see quite a demand on the agriculture and environment and recreation grant categories. I'll let the project managers speak to that as they come up and talk about this next grant cycle. But I think what we've seen there is a high volume of grant applications, but that has what has really helped make this a competitive grant program and really get quality projects in the door and funded. It's hard to determine the best data point to say what the need is out there in the community. And so the requested grant amounts that we get is kind of the best that we have to work with. But I think it's important to recognize that even if we had unlimited funding, that we wouldn't necessarily want to fund or should fund every grant application that comes in. We still want this to be a really high quality program, and we really look to fund projects that will be a good showcase of the water plan grant program, kind of on the edgier side of water projects, if there is such a thing. So that is kind of what we look to fund. Over the past 2 years, we've seen about a $4 to $5 million difference in funding available versus funding that has been requested. And so from that, we base the staff recommendation to put an additional $3 million of the $8.3 million general fund into this next fiscal year, given that we have $7 million from the projects bill, bringing the total up to $10 million. Our recommendation was to divide that $3 million amongst the top 4 requested categories, which would be all of them except for engagement and innovation, so as not to pick winners and losers, recognizing that those tend to be the more expensive types of projects, and we see the bigger dollar requests for those categories. I think that was pretty much all I wanted to cover, but I'm sure there are questions that you all have. As always, we're open to making some adjustments based on your feedback.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Are there questions for Lauren about the matter? Director Hawkins.
Thanks, Lauren. That was a helpful presentation, and the memo was helpful too. I had a couple of questions about or concerns about the staff recommendation. It looked to me like the recommendation was making decisions for the next 3 years, so making decisions that how the 8.3 would be spent, and also making that sort of even 4-way split for all 3 years. Is that the recommendation?
So going back and reading the recommendation, I agree that that is how it comes across. I think my intention was to make that recommendation, at least as far as the 4-way split for just this next grant cycle for the next fiscal year. And then also including in that recommendation the caveat that depending on what we see in the August application deadline, giving the board additional flexibility to either make more funding available or to change that allocation based on the applications that we've received at that point. So I'm happy to clarify that in the recommendation and make that specific for just this next grant cycle.
Yeah, and one of my concerns here is that this is the first time we're being given general fund money to spend, and only shooting for 10 million total over the next 3 years to me seems like we're staying static. And I know that we need to grow our internal capacity to be able to manage a bigger grant program, but I would like to see us actually expanding the amount that we're giving and watching the applications that are coming in as people know that we have more funding available. So we already have the project bill allocation of 7 million. For this year, I'm comfortable adding 3 million for this year and revisiting that, but I would like more flexibility for the remainder of the funding. And in my opinion, I would like flexibility for taking a look at that four-way split, because I see that the ag and environmental and rec are much more oversubscribed than the other two. And so I would like us to really take a hard look at that and making sure that we're making the best use of these funds.
Yes, Director Hawkins, I think that makes a lot of sense. We can absolutely revisit this, as we get into the next 2 years of the 3. I think, what you mentioned about kind of staff capacity is absolutely on point and something that we've kind of been struggling with. With this additional funding, it did not include additional bodies. And I think with a one-time funding allocation, it makes it difficult to ask for an additional FTE, not knowing what's going to happen with the long-term funding proposals that are out there. I know you all know that CWCB staff works really hard, and I think it's harder than maybe you would expect to give away money to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible way, in a way that really is working towards the measurable objectives and goals in the water plan. And so I would just say that we've kind of seen, while we know that there's a need for funding out in the communities, that to do this right and to do this in a way that we're really proud of, it does require quite a bit of outreach and engagement with the various stakeholder groups to develop projects that are really high quality and really are the multiple purpose, multiple benefit projects that we try and fund and advocate for through the water plan. And so, looking across some of the other state grant programs, we've seen that, a lot of these agencies have dedicated staff, that this is what they do. They, their full-time job is to administer grants and really work with the communities and walk people through the process and evaluate options. And I think we're, the folks sitting behind me, I can't really take credit for this at all. The folks sitting behind me are really doing that job on top of, running the conservation program and the watershed restoration program and being the flood experts and the ATM experts and now doing demand management. So I'm really trying to look out for just the workload issues that we're starting to see really become an issue in the staff. And with this, the more this grant program grows, both in terms of its longevity and in terms of its funding, we're seeing a sort of a compounding effect in that workload. Staff is still processing grants and evaluating progress of projects that received funding back in 2017. So I just want to recognize the work that has gone into this program and try and really thread the needle in a way that we can feel, is still really full of integrity in how we're managing this grant program, knowing that having a little bit of competition really creates good projects on the back end, and trying to be really cognizant of funding projects that meet the goals and objectives of the water plan and are really high quality, high value projects. So I'll stop talking.
And if it's okay, I'd just like to reiterate that if the intent is to grow the amount of funding that this agency is giving out for the implementation of the water plan, we need to prioritize growing the capacity within the agency to match that. So if there's anything we can do as a board to support that, I don't want to see a larger and larger grant program just putting lots of pressure on existing staff and burning them out, because I realize how hard the staff is working.
Right. Thank you for that.
I just need to echo something on this. I think it's important to recognize how the agency has changed over the last few years. And one of the concerns that I have always had is that I don't want us to be just a grant funding agency. One of the benefits that we've seen is that when you have project managers that are also able to be on the ground, that they're not just administering grants. There's a huge benefit to the community that we have our agricultural expert that is also doing not just grant administration, but working with project proponents and stakeholders across the state. They know what a good project is. They know them when they see them. And so I think it's important to recognize when you see, I'm bringing up agriculture because it's the next one on the list. There's 12 grants listed, but that's not all the active grants that person is managing at this point. That's what's on this list right now. And so I just want us to be aware of that. And we are trying to make sure that the focus is that we are effectively and ethically working with the people of the state of Colorado's money to create the best projects possible. So that is just the goal as we move forward. I hope the board is in support of that mission, and thank staff also, because this is this has been a heavy lift, and people that weren't responsible for managing grants prior to Colorado's water plan are now becoming the leaders in these grant programs. And so it was a job above and beyond what they were previously doing.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you, Lauren. Director Brody.
First of all, I want to echo the words of encouragement and thanks. You guys do amazing work on this and so many other programs. So let us know what we can do to support you. In terms of the allocation going forward, I just had a question. I wanted to find out if it would be worth considering that perhaps not all of the funding should be directed to specific categories, but maybe hold some of it out that could be applied irrespective of category based on the overall quality of applications that you're seeing.
Thank you, Director Brody. Yes, that's something that we've struggled a bit with as a staff. The funding that we receive through the projects bill is in the legislation allocated to the specific categories. And then likewise, the language that's now in statute lists the project categories that you see there on the slide. So there isn't, I feel like, a whole lot of flexibility for sort of earmarking or just setting aside some funding to see what we get in the door. But that said, I mean, part of the process that we go through as a staff when we get the applications, we kind of sit down as a group and evaluate, like this has multiple components. Would this be a better fit in this category, even though they applied for agriculture, for example? Would it be a better fit for the environment and rec category? So we kind of do reserve the right with applicants to shuffle around where we think there's a better fit. So that kind of happens naturally. But I think agreed that flexibility is always helpful in programs like this because we are sort of on the receiving end of projects that come in.
Director Yon?
Thanks, Lauren. So do we need to change the recommendation a little bit, or do you have something?
I think maybe if we just clarify that the staff recommendation applies to this next grant cycle for the fiscal year 19-20 rather than for the full 3 years, giving the board the flexibility to revisit it later. And we can make sure that that's reflected in the minutes.
So you take 3 million from this 8.3 million and put it with the 7 million in the project bill for this next fiscal year,
Right.
and then we'll revisit the rest after that.
Yes.
Okay, with that change, I would vote staff recommendation on agenda item 28. 28.
It's been moved by Director Yon and seconded by Director Goebel to approve staff recommendation as amended in Lauren's presentation. Is there any discussion? Director Hawkins.
Sorry, I have a quick question. Does that mean that the $10 million sort of figure for the overall funding would only apply to the 2019-2020 year?
I think based on what I'm hearing from you all that makes sense.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, okay.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Lauren, I just wanted to add that I think the other directors made some really helpful comments, and I too want to echo how appreciative I am, and I know we all are, how staff have stepped up. And I'm looking at all of you. Everyone's taken on additional roles to make this happen and really rose to the occasion here. And I think Water Plan Grant Day is one of my favorite days because it's really exciting. It's really exciting to see that we do a lot. I don't think we're by any means getting to where we just give grants out. We saw that yesterday, that we do a lot. But one thing that I think is really special is to see that these grants are from every corner of Colorado, and that by putting in a little or a lot, we are making a big difference for people on the ground and for natural resources and every type of these projects. So thank you all for your effort in that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
We are on to agenda item 29, Water Plan Grants Overview.
Great. So in that vein, I'm going to not spend a lot of time because we have a ton of grants to get through. But so this is looking at the second and final grant round, excuse me, for this fiscal year. We did receive $7 million through the projects bill. These are grants that came in on the February 1st grant deadline. We are going to be walking through each category and asking the board to approve those grants and the staff recommendation as a block, with always the exception that if there is one grant that you want to take out and discuss separately and vote separately on, by all means, we can do that. We're just trying to be efficient with your time. I wanted to explain a little bit about the process that these have gone through on the staff's side as a reminder. And I know we have some new board members that this is kind of your first time with Water Plan Grant Day, if that's what we're calling it now. So yeah, right. So this is the second year of this program, and I think that we've learned a lot and have tried to adapt our process in a way that makes us a little bit leaner and more efficient. And so to that end, for this second year, we received applications and gave about a 30-day window where we turned around and then put them all on the CWCB website for public consumption and review, and your all review and consideration. So everything we got in the door is up on the website. And then each category, I don't know what to call them. We call them buckets internally, so we'll just call them buckets. Each bucket, program manager developed their own small committee of experts that then they went through the applications that they received, did a little bit of horse trading with the other project managers for applications that seemed to fit better in other categories, and then met and collectively determined which projects they were going to recommend move forward. Then a second level of review took place where the leadership team, section chiefs, and me and excuse me, Becky, met and reviewed those applications through a second filter. And so that's what you all are considering today, is the product of basically a two-step process that we went through with all of these applications. And I think that we're really proud of what we're bringing to you today. As I said, I think having a competitive grant program makes for better projects that are funded out the door, because we have a little bit of flexibility to fund the projects that we feel like are really the best quality and making progress towards the water plan. We did receive 42 applications this grant round, and are recommending $3.7, almost $3.8 million worth of grant awards to you today. So I'm not going to spend any more time because we have so many applications to go through, and ask Alex to come up and talk about his recommendations for the agriculture category.
Thank you, Lauren. Before we get going, Director Hawkins.
Thank you. I need to recuse myself from agenda item 29C. Can I ask that it be pulled? And I am happy to leave the room when you get to that one.
Great. How about we go through A through L first, and then we come back to C.
Yeah, so this is Alex Funk, CWCB staff for the record. And yeah, I'll propose the sort of in 5 as a block. I was going to kind of go through as an overview of all of them very quickly. And then for the voting, we can sort of configure that in a way that we'll do the 5 initially and then do the block for Mabel. Oh,
Alex, will you just pause right before you go? You can do the overview, but when you get into the detail of agenda item 29C, will you allow just a second
yes.
for Director Hawkins to step out?
So I've drawn the indefinite short straw of going first for all these grants. I'm sure everyone behind me is taking notes on what I've already messed up on in terms of sequencing this. But essentially what I want to kind of do here in the next few minutes is provide just a kind of quick overview of how staff and the broader sort of review committee for the agriculture projects approached this application cycle. We had 12 applications for about 1.7 million with only $600,000 available. So that was a very competitive round. I just kind of want to highlight a few of the criteria that we were looking at as a part of that process. And then from there, I'll kind of just segue into sort of a very brief overview of each of the projects. And if we want to vote on them individually that way, we can do it
Let's vote on them in block,
in block.
but we'll remove C from the block and vote
Okay,
on it separately.
All right, thank you. So with that, so just briefly, the agriculture category is a little broad, but some of the projects that are included in this bucket include irrigation infrastructure improvements where there are multiple benefits provided, projects further the adoption of sort of innovative approaches to on-farm conservation and efficiency, and sort of like broader efforts to address sort of critical issues facing agricultural and rural communities in Colorado. Projects are evaluated according to roughly 3 different set of criteria. One are the sort of framework of criteria that are included in the water plan itself. These are found in Chapter 9. These include commitment to collaboration, multi-benefit, local investment. We then look at the guidelines of the water plans themselves that say, we're kind of looking for new projects that encourage new ways of approaching old problems. We're really looking for those multiple benefit projects and demonstrating those benefits. And then there are some ag-specific criteria as well. And so in terms of reviewing these grants, there was a broader committee that was put together that included myself, other CWCB staff, staff from the Department of Agriculture, and then we also gathered input from Parks and Wildlife as well. And so of the 6 projects that we're recommending today, some of the sort of criteria that really stood out in this discussion were, one, sort of development of innovative approaches to water resource challenges. And so projects that really kind of excel in this area include San Miguel County's Payment for Ecosystems program. This is potentially a really exciting model for other sort of local governments across the state to, utilize local, government support and funding to support, on-farm soil health and other sort of efficiency practices. So it kind of touches on a lot of things in the water plan in terms of supporting innovative financing mechanisms. And so, we felt that that was a kind of innovative approach to a sort of a high criteria that's included in the ag section of the water plan. Another one is the Colorado Open Lands Conceptual Groundwater Easement. This is something that would be new to Colorado. It's actually relatively new. Period. It's actually looking at, placing an easement. So in Colorado, you can put, an easement on surface water and tie that to land, but it's never been done to groundwater. And so Colorado Open Lands is going to be sort of convening a broad stakeholder process to look how that could be utilized to sustain aquifer levels in the San Luis Valley and provide, some financial support for farmers in the region. The Trout Unlimited's High Elevation Irrigation Efficiency Project is looking at 3 new innovative practices to improve irrigation efficiency in high elevation meadow systems. These are all relatively new, like prototypes that they're then going to, develop sort of an outreach to reach, other high elevation ranchers and producers across the state. other sort of criteria that we looked at were verified multi-benefits for a project. So when we're looking at these infrastructure projects, we're really looking within that application in the letters of support that, we're not just quoting this is going to be a benefit to the river system, but there's actually some documented evidence that supports that and kind of clear connections with other state objectives. So projects that really fit this description include the Peterson Ditch Rehabilitation Project. This is sort of a critical structure, not only for the irrigators that are serviced by this ditch, but it also is one of the primary sources of augmentation water for local municipalities, as well as a significant portion of Colorado's credits towards the South Platte Recovery Program. There was also the Maybell Ditch, which Craig Godbutt mentioned earlier. Anyway, you guys missed that joke. It's a great project, has a lot of great local partners, local support, and so it's going to benefit recreation and the environment. Turner and Logan Cabin, another great project. This is going to, not only improve efficiency and operational benefits for these two irrigation systems by combining it into one and piping it, but it's also going to help reduce salinity and selenium into the Colorado River Basin, furthering state programs that are designed to support projects that reduce both of those pollutants into the broader kind of Colorado River Basin and improve water quality for downstream users and endangered fish species. Some other criteria that we were looking at were secure match. So seeing that the project had match kind of cash in hand when applying for this. Local support as evidenced by those letters of support. And then finally, I just want to note that the Water Plan Grant Program is a statewide program. So when we were kind of evaluating all these different grants, the review committee did sort of make an effort to achieve some geographic distribution of high-ranking projects across the state. So while we had 6 applications from the Gunnison, it's tough to navigate that. So that's just something that it's not like an official guideline, but the guidelines do say that it is a statewide program. So we were trying to pick high quality projects from across the state. And, there's some projects sort of compete with themselves when they're from the same basin in that scenario. So with that, I do have a few applicants here today. I have Judy Lopez from Colorado Open Lands, Larry Frame from Peterson, Hillary Cooper from San Miguel County, Jesse from Trout Unlimited, and I believe Paul Maudlin might be here as well for Turner Ditch Company. For those of you that came, I don't know if you want to come up and then turn and maybe kind of just briefly discuss. Maybe Judy, you want to start and just say a little bit about the project?
Thanks, Alex. Judy, thanks for being here. If you could say your name and who you're with.
Yeah, my name is a lot shorter than Alex Lopez. My name is Judy Lopez. I'm with Colorado Open Lands. I want to thank, on behalf of COL and our partners in this project, your continued innovation in looking at and thinking about ways that we can preserve natural resources across the state. This project will help us develop a different type of easement model that hopefully addresses our future water needs, not just in the San Luis Valley, but across the state. I'd also like to thank staff for all their help, recommendations, and time that they put in considering and teasing out the projects. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Judy? Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Judy.
Larry, want to come up?
Hi, I'm Larry Frame, Superintendent of the Julesburg Irrigation District. We own and operate the Peterson Canal. Our project started out a year ago when I asked for a $3.3 million loan from you folks. Got that secured. We went to an engineer to begin with to get the feasibility study for the 3.3. We contacted a second engineer who gave us another number. We're looking at that. We also contacted a third group of engineers to do a peer review. So we don't really know the number yet exactly. We've secured a grant from SPRAP, a grant from District 64 Reservoir, 2 local grants from the Julesburg, Colorado area, the Campbell Foundation and the Strateski Foundation. and now hopefully a grant from the CWCB that hopefully will kick this project off. I still have to do a vote from the shareholders to make our contract with you good. So thank you for your consideration. Any questions?
Larry, thanks for being here. You came a long way. And thanks
Thank you.
for sharing about all the work that you've done. It sounds like you've been really busy
We have
rounding up funding for the project. So good work on that. And thank
Thank
you. Director Yon.
Yeah, you drove a long way. He drove further than I did, so 6.5 hours probably. He's at the far reaches of Northeast Colorado, and it's a busy time of year running water, so I appreciate you being here, Larry, and taking the
Thank you,
time
Jim.
to do this. And this is a good project. It's a diversion structure rehabilitation, but it's a project that's important for endangered species in Nebraska. It's important for recharge in our area. It's important for the Peterson Canal itself and its shareholders. So it does a lot of things through this one diversion structure, and it's one of the last in the state, and it's an important one that we have it in good shape, because right now it's pretty dangerous, and Larry's dealt with it for a long time, so it's high time, and I hope we can get the shareholders to approve it with all these other funding, with all the work that you did to get this other funding as well. So
Yeah,
thanks.
they're going to get a chance to vote on that pretty quick. We've got to get that third engineer review of the project. And then we'll have some solid numbers to get back with them.
All right.
Thank you to Rachel for working with us. So, all right, thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here.
Hillary?
Hi, thanks for having us here today. My name's Commissioner Hillary Cooper. I'm a commissioner from San Miguel County, and we are very excited about our Payment for Ecosystem Services program. It's a program that's going to help our farmers and ranchers develop, enhance water quality, water conservation, riparian habitat, soil and range health, and essentially help them keep their land as we struggle with changing climate conditions, and help keep their land in really good health and retain water in innovative ways that will help the ecology and environmental benefits of their land. We also are excited to continue to work with Alex on this project to turn it into a model that can be used for other communities around Colorado. So it's great to be here. It was cool for me to read through some of the other projects that are being done around the state, and thank you guys very much for supporting all these projects.
Thank you for being here. Are there any questions for the commissioner? Director Hawkins.
Hillary, thanks for making the trip over. I just wanted to voice my support for this project. I really like the link with soil health and resiliency with drought. So thanks for bringing this project and expanding it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading your application, and I hope that you and Alex will come back to us and give us an update when you're done with it, because this does sound like it could be really helpful for a lot of other communities. So thanks for putting forward the idea and for being here.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Great, thank you.
I'm going to call up Jesse.
Good afternoon. I'm Jesse Kruthop with Trout Unlimited, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you real briefly on the innovative irrigation efficiency project for Mountain Meadows. This, in a nutshell, will be real brief. It's basically taking technology that's available and trying to implement it out in the field in a way that's cost effective for grass hay producers.
Great,
Thanks
thank you,
again for
Jesse.
coming to Gunnison.
Are there any questions for Jesse? Great, thank you.
And is Paul Turner here? No. Okay. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have generally about the process or any other of the grants or applications that were received.
Are there any additional questions for Alex about these agenda items? If not, I think we could move forward. We have staff recommendation. Again, we would be considering items A through L, but not C. And so if we want to move on to that, is there a motion? Director Yon?
I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 29A through L, excluding C.
All right, it's been moved by Director Yon and seconded by Director Brody to approve staff recommendation on items 29A through L, excluding C. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Now we will be considering item 29C. We'll wait a few seconds. Great. Motion? Yeah. Yeah. Director Brown, excuse me, Director Brown.
Yes, I move to approve staff recommendation for item 29C.
It's been moved by Director Brown and seconded by Director Yon to approve staff recommendation on item 29C. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex. Our next item is, a set of items is item 29M through Q, Conservation and Land Use Grants. Kevin.
Okay. Good afternoon. Kevin Reedy for the record, CWCB staff. And I was really excited to get up here because we have our own day now, so that's good. It's the water plan grant day. So I've got 5 grants here, and 3 of which I am recommending, and 2 of which I'm not at this point. Chris Sturm is going to take the last one. He's going to help manage that grant, so he's going to present on that. But I'll give you a little overview as well, considering what Alec Fink said. The very similar guidelines as he had mentioned before. I don't want to go through everything like that, but multi-use objectives, local participation, collaboration, very important. I don't want to belabor those points either, but also part of what I'm looking at too is in terms of these water plan goals of the land use and integration of water efficiency into land use, as well as the water efficiency goal of 400,000 acre feet by 2050. So I keep those in mind as well. I've actually conscripted some folks to be on a committee now with me. So I've got folks from DOLA and DWR as well who have been helping out with these. And you'll see in a minute that the DWR help was, it was very helpful in this because it goes into some water rights issues as well that I'm not as versed in on that either. But also the another thing is that I'm looking for innovative things, and a lot of these grants that I've come across in the last year and a half have been quite innovative, kind of leading the edge. We're doing a lot of things that are not happening in other parts of the country actually. And also, but I want to see how these are expandable and how these can help other people. So we don't have to be refunding these things over and over again. They can create some tools or guidance that can be passed on to other folks. So those are kind of the basic criteria going through. These kind of span everything from some stormwater structures to partnerships to landscape transformations to going into the one water realm with planning for the city and county of Denver, and then to invasive removal. So it kind of a wide swath of these things. And usually that's the case with these grants. We a lot of variety of things in these grant funds that I usually get. Really quickly, the first 2 that I could not recommend right now, but that I'm not closing the door on, I'm working with the applicants to go forward with some of these plans in the future, just to make them more appropriate so they fit into the realm of what we need to be looking at. One is the stormwater infrastructure. It's a bone farm co-housing community. Really interesting idea, really interesting project, a small subdivision being put in up in Longmont. They wanted to really put in a lot of stormwater capture, I'll say, And so we reviewed it and looked at it, and it just didn't quite fit. There's a water rights implication with these things. And also part of their grant proposal was for gray water infrastructure inside the new houses they're building, which is great. State law says we can do that, but Longmont, as far as I know right now, does not have a local ordinance that enacts that. So we would be going against that. City and County of Denver and Pitkin County, I think, are one of the few places in the state that do that right now. And for that reason, of course, they were oversubscribed as well. For that reason, we had to kind of put them on the shelf. I talked to him a little bit about if they're going to do this project, maybe we could come up with some kind of guidance, some kind of documentation of how they go about this process, so we can go forward with maybe another subdivision who wants to do the same thing that would help them down the road. And so I kind of directed them back to the next grant process. Also, the idea that rainwater harvesting pilot project we've got, they could fit into that as well. Not sure if they want to go that route either. So, but that was the real big thing was the water rights implication. And I'm not sure if Director Jan wants to say anything about that. He has some information on this.
All right, thanks, Kevin. They came to the South Platte Basin Roundtable for support and didn't get it. So, and that was the reason. It was a water rights implication. So it's not a bad idea, but the way they were proposing to harvest the water, when we all looked at it, we said, well, we do that and we call it irrigation. And so, you know, they were having separate plots catching the water, and so they really didn't have a water right to do those kind of things. And that was our concern. And they really didn't give any thought to that, and weren't open to any suggestions to the contrary. So we just did not recommend it. And so I appreciate you guys looking at that and finding the same thing we did.
Exactly. So, okay, and then moving on to the next grant, Breaching the Divide West Slope Front Range Partnerships to Integrate Water and Land Use Planning. This is a good idea. It's just I'm working with them to kind of flesh out the idea. It wasn't detailed enough for me to really make a good decision on, and I really wanted to make a good decision on this because they're talking about bringing folks from East Slope and West Slope together to talk about these things. And as everybody knows, this can get kind of contentious. And so I just didn't have enough details, and it was a little bit too high level for me. So and they didn't have the match. They only had 25% match at the time. So I said, let's just table this for a little while. And I'm working with them to kind of flesh out this concept a little bit more. There are folks that I'm working with on other projects as well. So it's right in the mix of this kind of thing. But that's the reason why that one was there. So we'll see when they come back for August. So the next two I'm going to go through. One is the Transforming Front Range HOA from Fort Collins Utilities. And this is a really interesting project. This is something that I think we need to be pursuing more. In my time at a water utility, always had issues trying to work through HOAs and large commercial properties to save some water and be more water efficient. So they're proposing 6 case studies that they're going to come through, and they're going to have a competitive process where people will join, send their plans in, and they're going to pick these programs and projects. And basically they're going to take out and transform large scale landscapes. 7% of their accounts are these kind of accounts in their water use, but their water use is more like 40% of their total use. So it's a really good target from to hit, very efficient, cost-effective way to do it. And we're going to have a guidance and case studies that come out of this that will help other utilities do the same thing. They did not make it for this meeting today. And the next one, the Denver One Water Plan Greenway Foundation. This is a really interesting and innovative one. It's going to be a big project, and I've got Devin Buckles here from the Greenway Foundation that if you guys would like to have her say a word or two, she's happy to. She's traveled down from Denver. But really what this is organizing City and County of Denver's departments, everybody who deals with water and land use, bringing them together into one way to look at this water resource in a more holistic manner, working with urban drainage as well as Denver water, metro wastewater, and everything from wastewater to stormwater to potable water to reuse water, and trying to integrate this into and see where there's gaps and where they have some overlap and where they can kind of align their plans better. Really good time to do this. Denver has just approved their comprehensive plan out to 2040, as well as their land use and mobility plan. Their parks plan is for their city council, I think, next week for approval as well. So they've gone through this big process, a lot of water elements in all these plans. And it's a way to kind of take these things and put them into one way so that they can figure out a better way to work with each other. And also it's, it's going to help with the water efficiency side, but as well as the watershed and the water quality side as well. So I think it's going to be a really good one. And we actually never had that, I think, in Colorado yet. We've never had a plan like this. So again, we're kind of pushing those boundaries. They've done it out east, Philadelphia and DC, but they're more in water quality and flooding issues and stormwater. Whereas we're kind of dealing with different things. So definitely can't recommend this one enough. This is a good one. And Devin, if you want to come up and just say a word or so, we'll have Devin come up and.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, good afternoon. I'm Devin Buckles, the director of the Water Connection, which is the policy and water resources arm of the Greenway Foundation. And on behalf of the foundation and our project partners, the City and County of Denver and Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, first, I just want to say thank you so much for your consideration of this grant. And a big thanks to Kevin Reedy, CWCB staff, and others who have been working with us on this application and for bringing it forward with a positive recommendation for full funding. So we appreciate that. If funded, this plan would truly be a giant leap forward for a more aligned approach to watershed health and water management in the Denver metro area. The focus of the plan is the City of Denver. However, with a project partner of Urban Drainage and Flood Control District as a key partner, that means that the outcomes will be able to influence 60% of the state's population. As many of you are aware, the city is growing at an unprecedented rate, but it has limited land use policies to help guide water decisions as demands increase. This plan will establish a new framework for working across organizations for a more holistic approach to water system management and create a new model for how we build and rebuild our watersheds. It will produce tangible tools such as databases and reports, but it will also produce less tangible but equally as important outcomes in the form of enhanced relationships among land use and water planning entities. If funded, this one water plan has the potential to become a model for other Front Range communities seeking greater land use and water policy alignment. And it stands to become, of course, a prime example of the implementation of the state water plan. So I hope you will support our request for funding to allow this unprecedented plan to move forward. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Devin, thanks for making the trip and for being here. And I was just whispering with Director John now, Jim Yon, Director Yon, that's what he gets. I really appreciated your presentation last May about the gutter bin in Salida, and so I'm excited to see what you guys come up with next.
Thank you, and we're on a roll with those, by the way. They're going to be installed in a number of different Front Range communities as well as Vail, among others. So
it's awesome.
Stay tuned. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Devin or Kevin about this? Great, thank you.
Okay, great. So now, last but not least, we've got 29Q, and I'm going to have Chris Sturm come up and talk about this one. Here you go, Chris.
Okay, good afternoon. Chris Sturm, CWCB staff. I'm going to present this one for Kevin. This was originally submitted to the Environment and Rec category for funding and pretty strapped for money in that program with all the requests we got in that category. So it also fit in conservation and land use. So I asked Kevin to take a look at it, and I thank him for that. But I'm doing the presentation because I want to keep him out of the hot seat. We do live in the same neighborhood. I've been known to see him socially from time to time. So I want to keep our wives on good terms too. This is an invasive phreatophyte removal project. It's Russian olive removal. It's very similar to a lot of different projects we funded in the past. We used to have an invasive phreatophyte removal program that was well funded, and it's similar and meets the criteria of those programs as well. The one big difference with this one is they're proposing and this is the Montezuma County Noxious Weed Department. They're proposing to remove Russian olive from ditches and canals, whereas in the past, we've mostly seen this focused on riparian areas. We have also funded invasive removal projects in upland areas where we're having ornamental trees, Russian olives, and mostly brush and olive. Tamarisk aren't really all that ornamental, but removed from people's yards and replacing it with native species. So we've done that as well. So having gone through all the criteria, it met not only the criteria for the Colorado Water Plan funding, but also the Invasive Free Identified Control Program funding. But just recently brought to staff's attention that this application was submitted to the Southwest Basin Roundtable and was denied funding, and there were some reasons. And I think there's a history here between the Montezuma Valley Irrigation Company and the Weed Control District here. And the irrigation company did not support this application. I'm told by the county that over 60% of the infrastructure supply in this area is owned by the irrigation company. So there is a potential for a lot of these projects to take place on canals that they operate. And the irrigation company didn't support it for a number of reasons. Some of them that they didn't show a plan to dispose of the debris. They didn't show how to mitigate water loss through dead roots left behind in the ditch bank. They didn't address safety on working by fast moving water. Didn't address methods to mitigate debris that may end up in the irrigation ditches as a result of the removal, and didn't provide an up-to-date map. I think there's a lot going on here behind the scenes of which I'm not aware. I don't think that I want to be fully aware of it. So I tried to get to the root issue here as quickly as I could. No pun intended there. And looking at a couple of really key things, and that the applicant, the Montezuma Valley Weed District, they assert that the Colorado Noxious Weed Act requires landowners to control and suppress invasive species, including Russian olive. And that landowners can actually be cited for this if they don't control it. And on the Montezuma Valley Irrigation Company's website, it says verbatim that they will not be spraying weeds in their right-of-way, and it is the responsibility of the landowners to control weeds on their property. So what the Weed District is proposing to do is to help these landowners control invasive weeds on their property. And that, coupled with all the other criteria and invasive removal projects, has me up here recommending this project for funding.
Chris, are the applicants here?
No, they're not.
Okay. Are there any questions for Chris about this project? Director Hawkins?
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Chris and Kevin, for working with me on this issue. As Chris mentioned, this project, or a very similar project, came in front of the roundtable. There was a timing issue. The application didn't get in time for the county to come to the roundtable and talk about the project. So that was part of the problem with, I don't think we had done an email approval of an application before at the roundtable. But there were substantive concerns about this. And, I am hesitant to put the CWCB in the middle of a fight between Montezuma County and the Montezuma Valley Irrigation Company. But I do wonder whether it would be possible for the county weed department to resolve these issues with the Montezuma Valley Irrigation Company. I talked to the general manager and a board member about this application and got an indication from them that they just thought that there needed to be some coordination with the county. So is there a possibility that we could resolve these issues by asking for coordination?
Certainly, and that's one of the requirements of the grant program is that we work collaboratively on these projects. So that what I would ask, if approved, is that they work with the company to address the issues that were specifically brought up. I think there's a lot of history here, like I said, of which we're not aware that I think you're saying we don't want to get involved in, and I agree with that. But it's still, looking at the project itself, what I'm seeing here is that the weeds, the Russian olives, need to be removed, and the irrigation company is telling landowners that it's their responsibility to remove it. So I'm hopeful that the county and the irrigation company can come to some kind of agreement, or at least an agree to disagree, but it's okay to remove. There's also opportunities to look at canals and ditches that aren't in the service area of the Montezuma Valley Irrigation Company. Of course, I would ask the same thing of the county for other irrigation companies, that they collaborate with them as well.
Well, unless there's objection from other board members, I'd like to pull this from the block approval so we can make sure that we've got that conditioned approval clear when we take the vote. But thanks for fleshing this issue out for us.
Okay.
That seems like a great idea. Are there any questions, any additional questions for Kevin or Chris about their recommendations? Okay, I think we have staff recommendation for items 29M through P, if we will remove Q from the block. So is there any action the board would like to take? Director Brody.
I will move that we accept staff recommendations on items 29M through 29P.
It's been moved by Director Brody and seconded by Director Goebel to approve staff recommendation on items 29M through P. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Director Hawkins?
I would like to move to approve staff recommendation on item 29Q, except for I'd like to amend the staff recommendation to direct staff to ask the applicant to work with any ditch companies and make sure that they've resolved issues before going out and working on a ditch company's system.
It's been moved by Director Hawkins and seconded by Director Yon to approve staff recommendation on item 29Q with conditions. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin and Chris. Our next items are 29R through W, which are the engagement and innovation grants. Ben.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben Wade, for the record, CWCB staff, and Director Riss was discussing some of the engagement innovation, had some of the lack of funding, if you will, but to remind the board, this is actually pretty new for the CWCB to give out education grants, and so it's still in its infancy. But I think that as we move forward, we're going to get a lot more projects coming in, and thankfully, even though it's small, there's no riffraff or panderfacklers. Actually, this past round, we had 6 that applied specifically for engagement innovation. I actually talked to 3 or 4 others that did not apply this go around. So just to let the board know that there was more interest than applied. So hopefully they do come in the next fiscal year and apply there. But we did get these 6. There are 2 grants that have other category funding, and I'll let Chris talk about that. That would be in the environmental and rec. Which one is that? That is 29Z, and then Anna has a project 29NN that will take some funding from the innovation and engagement category to help fund that project as well. But just briefly go through these. I was thankful that I was able to recruit some committee members to review these grants with me, some in the room and some back at the office. So I appreciate their involvement and their input to these grants. And thank you for the applicants who were open to the suggestions of the committee to clarify or strengthen those applications. I'm going to start off with 29R. Adams State University is the applicant, and their water education initiative at Adams State University. I'm just going to focus this one real quick because we do have Rio de la Vista, who is the director at the Salazar Center at the university here. And so I was just going to bring her up and then just briefly go through the rest. But this is application. This project would do a couple things. It would help to develop a university program there at Adams State to get water curriculum into major disciplines, and also start going down the road of creating a water minor that would accompany other majors there. So that's exciting for Rio and the other staff there at the university, and for future students. They would also open up some community programs and work with PEPO and the other educational stakeholders there in the basin, bringing in some local and visiting experts to talk about the issue that the basin faces, and also put together a State of the Basin symposium in the fall. And so I'll bring up Rio here in just a second, but as it says in the memo, staff is approving at the full amount, at the requested amount. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up Rio de la Vista, again, the director at the Salazar Center there at Adams State University. And she can answer any questions and make a few comments. Rio?
Thanks, Ben. Welcome, Rio. If you'll state your name and who you're with.
Sure. Rio de la Vista, director of the Salazar Rio Grande del Norte Center at Adams State University. So thank you for having me today. Thank you, Director Dutton and Ben and the other staff members who helped me revise this and get it to where it could be recommended. And I did want to add that I just got confirmation yesterday from it's a package of 3 grants to achieve the match that comes with this. And I got confirmation from the Gates Family Foundation that they approved it and or they didn't approve it, but they're recommending it to their board for their June board meeting. So that's hopefully progress. And I'm just really excited to see how we can just, in the time I've been at the Salazar Center in Adams State, I feel like there's a gap in our water education in the Valley. We have great K through 12. We've got a lot of community, but the university sitting there is an opportunity, I think, to enhance, as I like to say, to grow the next generation of water leaders for our community, because as we all know, these issues aren't going away anytime soon. So I hope that we can achieve that, and your support makes it possible. So thank you. Any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer.
Thanks, Rio. Thanks for making the trip and for working with Ben on this. Are there any questions for Rio about her project? Great. Thank you.
All right, and then just wanted to briefly go through the other applications. 29S Ditch and Reservoir Company Alliance, better known as DARCA, is shifting their main conference and kind of bringing it down to the lower arc and the Rio, try to recruit some new members and provide some education on the water plan, sustaining agriculture, and try to reach that next generation of producers down and in this focused outreach down there. 29T, the 4 Mile Watershed Coalition, is working to put together some public outreach and education for some private homeowners in the areas that where so they could get educated, just the relationship between healthy forests and healthy watersheds, and the connection between upland forests and water quality and quantity, and hopefully enroll them in these private landowners in some fire mitigation programs to preserve approximately 500 acres. They're trying to reach 3,000 private landowners. So that's one of the several watershed health projects we have. The other one is Left-Hand Watershed Oversight Group, which is 29U. They are planning to put together regional watershed days where they bring in a lot of people from the community, from business, agriculture, recreation, environment, K through 12, and research, and get them together to go out into these watersheds to collect data and again, get them more connected with their watershed as a community. And then the third watershed health issue comes from 29V, Middle South Platte Alliance. They're actually going to focus right there between the St. Fran Creek and the Cache-la-Poudre River to talk to producers about watershed health issues. Let's see, finally, this was mentioned in Director Brody's director report this morning. Tri-County Health Department is going to be reaching 25,000 groundwater users in the counties of Adams, Arapahoe, and Douglas counties, and just providing them information on water conservation and the issues that they face as their communities grow and the water tables in the Denver Basin aquifers are falling, and try to get them to come to some workshops that they're going to plan to provide more education and outreach for those particular water users. So good to see this is a first groundwater education grant, at least for this category. So it's good to see that come through. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, staff approves or recommends approval of all these grants. Oh, I do want to mention just one thing. In the summary, in the data sheet for Middle South Platte Alliance, there was a little contingent, staff approval contingent on them just securing their funding. It's just all about grant timing. This particular grant that they're seeking elsewhere just happens to have their approval in the fall of this year. So just wanted to make that known to the board. So if we want to approve that separately, can, or.
Give me a second while I get there, Ben, but
Sure.
Did you note that that you approved your staff recommendation?
Yeah, I didn't put it on the board memo itself. I should have. I put it on the data sheet. It's at the very bottom. Funding recommendation.
Okay. So you would be recommending that we approve item 29B contingent on match funding?
Right. Yep.
Okay. I think that if someone wanted to, maybe since it's a contingency and we pulled the last one, let's go
Sure.
ahead and pull V.
Okay.
So if there are questions or if someone wants to go ahead and move forward on staff recommendation for items R through W without V, that would probably be the next order of operations. Director Brown?
I'd like to move staff approval on items 29R through W and with removing V for further discussion.
It's been moved by Director Brown and seconded by Director Anderson to approve staff recommendation on items 29R through W without V. Do we have a quorum? Great. Well, that's handy because there's 6 of us. So there's 7 of us. We're really doing it. Great. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, let's proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, and so now we have just agenda item 29B, and I would remind that staff have recommended the contingency. Director Brown.
I'd like to move approval of item 29V with staff approval with the contingencies.
It's been moved by Director Brown and seconded by Director Trick to approve item 29V, staff recommendation on item 29B with the contingency of the applicant receiving their matching funds.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ben.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. We are on to agenda item 29X through double K. Chris Sturm.
Thank you again, Chris Sturm, CWCB staff for the record, and I'll be presenting on the environmental and recreational category for the water plan grants. And just quickly, I'd like to go through our process. There's a committee of 4 people that score each of these applications. I really appreciate the help that I got from the staff in doing this. I won't name names in an effort to protect the innocent there, because no good deed goes unpunished, but they did put a lot of time into helping review these, as well as help me put together the board packet for this agenda item. So I really appreciate that. And we tried to make it relatively simple on how we scored and categorized these grants, in that we looked at the criteria for the grant program. We looked at the water plan, we looked at basin implementation plans, and said we're going to score these relative to their value as it relates to that criteria: high, moderate, low. So the results of that have nothing to do with the greater value of the project, but just as it relates to our mission with this grant program. And we did get a lot of good applications this round, and I think you'll probably see that through the funding recommendation. So I'm going to jump into these one by one and just do a quick summary of them. I have captured a lot of people in the audience that have come to support these. If I missed anybody, I'll just turn around, give me a holler, raise your hand. But the first one is 29X,
Chris,
Central Colorado Conservancy.
Chris, before you start going, sorry to interrupt you. Before you get into them, I just want to disclose again that in the hours that have passed since this morning, I am still a volunteer board member of the Colorado Rio Grande Restoration Foundation, and I have no financial interest or gain in this project. So just wanted to disclose that before you get into it. Please proceed.
Certainly. So is there anybody here from the Central Colorado Conservancy? Okay, don't see anyone. This is the only application we received from the Arkansas Basin. It's an Envision Recreation and Balance sediment control project. I think we're on to some cutting edge stuff here. I think this is long overdue. Recreation is very important in our state. Dispersed recreation in unorganized areas or unofficial type units, especially for camping, is of great value in this state. But we are looking at a tragedy of the commons in certain places. Recreation has increased and continues to increase in Chaffee County and other areas, and it's not without its impacts. And those impacts may be small on a footprint by footprint type basis, but taken cumulatively, they can have significant impacts. So this project is an assessment of dispersed camping areas and the access roads associated with those, which oftentimes can contribute large amounts of sediment into our waterways, and to come up with a methodology for that assessment and recommendations for mitigation. I think, like Kevin Reedy said earlier, it's nice to look at these projects not only for their value in their area, but also how can this be used in other parts of the state and not have folks recreating the wheel, so to speak. So I think that this project has a potential to really benefit a lot of other communities as well. For the Colorado Basin, there's 3 applications. 29Y is from the Pitkin County Board of Commissioners. I don't think there's anybody here today from the board. This is the Robinson Ditch Diversion Modification. This ditch has had problems over the years. It's unraveling a little bit in that it's very difficult for boaters to get through it, very difficult for fish to migrate through it, and is also causing some problems with diverting water itself. So improvements to the structure will address all of those issues. This one scored as a very high value project with the committee. Next, we have the Trout Unlimited and Blue River Watershed Groups. Blue River Integrated Watershed Management Plan. Richard Van Geitenbeek is here. We heard a presentation from Ben on this one earlier, so I won't go too deep into it other than to say that this is one of our top priorities in the water plan. Stream management plans are not easy. The applicant is applying for $30,000 from the environment and rec category and $16,000 from the engagement innovation. And I really do think it hits on elements of both very well. Although, Richard, you have really gone around the wheelhouse of grant programs in the CWCB on this one. So contracting will be interesting. But I do commend the applicant here in getting involved in this type of planning. It is not easy. I think the herding cats cliche is a little overused. This is more like herding polar bears because they have been known to eat their own. And you get into these waters and it can be very difficult. The next one recommended for funding is, we're starting with Gunnison Basin. There's two not recommended for funding, and I'm happy to discuss those after we get through all these other ones if there's any questions from the board. But jumping into applications from the Gunnison Basin, Ashley Bembenek. Did I get it? Okay, so we have support here for the Governor Basin Restoration Project. And this is queuing me up to also talk about how we look at environment and rec projects as far as filling gaps, achieving objectives in Colorado's water plan. Sometimes we look at projects that we see maybe smaller incremental gains to be had from them, but we also have to look at them as what are the consequences of not addressing an issue. Baseline for environment and rec in this state is something that easily can be lost, meaning that if we take one step forward, or we can be looking at taking 10 steps back. And these mine remediation projects are those types of projects, and that incrementally we can have some lift on water quality and improve habitat and stream function. But they are kind of hanging disasters out there, as we've seen with our fires and subsequent flooding. Imagine that on top of an area with a lot of mine tailings that can redisperse that into our watershed. So any effort to stabilize those mine tailings and reroute waterways from them is usually a good project, and this one did score well with the committee. Next up, we have Gunnison County Shady Island River Park. I think a lot of folks were at Garlic Mike's last night. The property just upstream of Garlic Mike's is where this one's being proposed for a recreational air boat launch and other improvements. And this is another case of what I was just talking about. This is going to have great value for this community in recreational access. The access point right now is not an official access point. It's a CDOT right-of-way. It's a safety issue. And if there were enough problems happening in a location like that, I think it could get shut down, and then you would lose a significant access, public access to the Gunnison River. So addressing that is absolutely wonderful. This site was also slated for development, and the best first step in avoiding disasters and impacts from floods is to not have development in the floodplain. So that also bodes very well for this project. We'll move on to agenda item DD, 29DD, from the National Forest Foundation. This is the Taylor Park, Gunnison County Watershed Erosion Control and Stream Restoration. A small request for $10,000. And this is largely to address issues with off-road vehicles or ATVs in an area of sensitive and ecological value. Again, honestly, with a small project like that, a small incremental gain. But I think looking at it at a larger point of view, what we could see here is that if enough folks are using off-road vehicles in ways that are not allowed, eventually it's going to get shut down, and that can have an impact on the local economy. And certainly they're seeing impacts to stream function as a result of that. Is anybody here from National Forest Foundation? Oh, and I'm very sorry to Gunnison County. I should say that Kathy Pagano is here representing Gunnison County. Agenda item 29EE, Trout Unlimited, the Osage Properties Channel and Irrigation Improvement Project. Jesse Kruthopt is here. Jesse's anyone? Okay. This is a riparian restoration project as well as an irrigation improvement project in an area where the channel is much wider than reference reaches in the area and has the potential to not only improve irrigation practices on the property, but also to improve stream function by restoring the riparian area and tightening up the channel. It can have water quality improvements in the realm of water temperature and possibly benefits to water supply and reducing evaporative loss. Next up is Trout Unlimited again, the Cimarron Canal diversion and gate replacement. Carrie Dennison is here. We heard about this one this morning, and I'll just add further to that, that whenever we can look at technology to improve operations for both agriculture and environment, we're generally seeing some wins, and this project did score well. Moving to the Rio Grande, I'm a resource here with the Colorado Rio Grande Restoration Foundation for the Park Creek Watershed Improvement Project. This is, again, another issue of the tragedy of the commons and loving an area to death where public recreation area, due to different disturbances, is degrading the stream channel and upland areas, and this is a proposal to address that. And I would just say briefly, Emma, that I think there's probably some lessons to be learned from the effort that's going on in Chaffee County too, because I suspect there's other areas in the Rio Grande that have issues like this. Moving to the South Platte, we have 2 applications from Colorado Open Lands recommended for funding. This is usually, this is unique in that when we don't have enough funding for all the applicants, we usually ask folks to prioritize their number one. These were the top 2 highest scoring grant applications in this round, all of them receiving a high value score, I believe. And the first being Watershed Analysis of Beaver Restoration Potential in Park County. Colorado Open Lands in Park County continues to be one of the spots around the state is really leading the charge on innovation in restoration, in watershed health. I know that beavers could be incredibly controversial, and we're not looking at reintroducing them in areas where they're not wanted. I will also say that they are a biological driver of ecosystem function, and were at one time very pervasive all throughout the state. I think as we look at being more resilient to flood and drought, this is something that we need to seriously consider. We've seen post-disaster areas with wet meadows be able to absorb debris flows with no impacts downstream whatsoever, and that's just one example. So this has a high-value project. Their next one is the Riparian Reconnect project. CWCB's been working with them on some phase of this for a long time. It started as an assessment of the entire watershed area, identifying high, moderate, and low functioning areas, and then prioritizing those for restoration. And this is moving that needle forward into implementation of priority areas. Okay, finally, 29KK. Hillary Cooper's here, and Lance McDonald, from the town of Telluride, and Hillary Cooper's a San Miguel commissioner, here for phase 2 of the Telluride Valley Floor Restoration Project on the San Miguel River downstream of the town of Telluride. This is an area that we've funded phase 1 on this one, along with a lot of other partners. Channelized reach of the San Miguel, a lot of mine tailings involved in it, so it's rerouting the channel back into its natural path and mitigating the impacts from those mine tailings. So I have some issues and additional needs, and I didn't do them by project because these are kind of general things that we address when we're contracting with folks, but I did want to bring the board's attention to them. Rather than identify the ones that have contingent match funding or not, I just put in that all funding awards are contingent upon the applicant's ability to secure their match funding. That's floating in different places with the different applicants. Staff generally have comments on the scope of work and engineering designs. We don't ask that applicants necessarily change things to meet our requirements. to address, to meet our comments. But we do ask that they respond to our comments. And so that's part of the additional need here. And I will be scheduling meetings with each applicant to discuss that. All grantees should adhere to their organizational procurement policies, and then just further recommending that if they don't have those, they consider using the state's. And then projects should comply with the CWCB rules and regulations for regulatory floodplains in Colorado, if applicable. So with that, if the board would like to hear from the applicants that are present, I can ask them to come up and say a few brief words. Yeah. I'm getting a nod. Yes. So we'll just do it in an order and ask Richard to come up first and state his name, tell us a little bit about the project.
Madam Chair, members of the Board of Directors, my name is Richard Van Geitenbeek. I work for Trout Unlimited. One of the things that I did not add this morning and that I would like to add and make you aware of is that our partner is Blue River Watershed Group. They have agreed to take this on as an organizational effort in the future. This is phase one. We'll be coming back with phase two, but I think as any one of you knows, these kinds of plans are always evolving, and somebody needs to shepherd them along and take them off into the future. And so Blue River Watershed Group has agreed to do that as an organization. They see it not only as a community service, but also as a capacity building mechanism for themselves. So I wanted to make you aware of that, and I think that's it. If you've got any other questions.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions for Richard? Great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ashley Benbenick. I'm here on behalf of the Uncompahgre Watershed Partnership, and with me is Brianna Greer from Uray Silver Mines. We're really excited to be presenting this grant application to the CWCB board, and we'd like to recognize our partners, Uray Silver Mines, Uray County, the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety, the U.S. Forest Service, and Trout Unlimited. We're looking forward to completing a cap and cover mine reclamation project with some stream restoration alongside it, and we hope to benefit just about 8 miles of downstream waters due to our Headwaters location. So thanks for having us today.
Thanks, ladies, for being here. Are there any questions? Director Jan.
No, thanks for coming. It just reminded me that in my first job as an engineer, I was able to spend some time in Uray, and we did cap and cover for some mine tailings up in Red Mountain Pass. So it was our company that got to design those. So it's a good project, and I appreciate you working on that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Kathy Pagano. I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development for Gunnison County, and we're excited to present the Shady Island River Park project to you all for possible grant funding. This has been in the making only for a short period of time. We purchased it approximately 2 years ago. It was the idea of one of our county commissioners, John Messner. Our community is very excited about it. If I would have known you were at Garlic Mike's last night, I would have told Garlic Mike because he is one of our loudest cheerleaders and is ready to do a fundraising campaign and put a billboard out. So he would have talked your ear off, but thankfully you probably got to have dinner in peace. So we're really excited about this project. We think it'll be an incredible amenity for our community. We have received a diversity of funding from public and private sources locally in our community and then through other grant sources. So we think it'll be a great project with restoration components, trail, fishing access, camping components, and a variety of resources for a diversity of users, which I think will be really great for our community. So thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions about the project? Thank you for being here.
Again, I'm Jesse Kruthop with Trout Unlimited, and thanks for the opportunity to present to you guys. The project is that I'm speaking of here is the Octate properties on Seboya Creek, and it's a riparian restoration and irrigation improvement projects. We're going to improve approximately a mile of stream, and in coordination with the NRCS EQIP program. And there's a whole suite of conservation activities that are going to take place, and Trout Unlimited's happy to be involved to move it along. So thanks again for your support.
Thanks, Jesse. Are there any questions for Jesse? Great. Thank you.
Heard about this before. Again, my name is Kerry Dennison. One thing I failed to mention about the Summerlin Canal project is we are going to be installing SCADA. There's existing SCADA at the head gate, but we'll be able to not only operate it from afar, but view the creek and the diversion at the same time through a camera. It has Wi-Fi capability. And we're going to be installing a split gate. So the gate will be opening from the bottom and the top, being able to avoid high water, and then changing the opening orifice as the flows diminish and as demands change on the system. So real unique technology that the ditch company is also very interested in installing. So thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Carrie, it looks like Director Hawkins has a question for you.
It's not a question. I noticed how many times TU came up on the applicant list, especially in this round, and just wanted to thank you. I am a project manager for another NGO, and I know how much work it is to put together collaborative projects. So I see TU as really coming forward with some great projects, and wanted to thank you and Jesse and the other folks in the audience who have all brought projects today.
Thank you for the recognition. I want to say that we can't do it without the CWCB staff. Working with Chris and Craig and the other staff members is very important to developing these projects. So we appreciate all the efforts and the support. Thank you.
Hi again. My name is Emma Reeser. I'm the director of the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project. And I wanted to mention that the Park Creek Watershed Improvement Project was really born out of the Upper Rio Grande Watershed Assessment, which was recently completed and partly funded by the CWCB, which looked at the upper watershed and really emphasized the need to address recreation impacts across the watershed on the national forest. And so Park Creek was one of the really key spots. And so it's been a pleasure to work with the Forest Service to develop this project, and really excited to, this is a big issue across the state. And so the Chaffee County study is going to be really interesting to look at. And I think the Park Creek project will be a pilot project for other basins across the upper watershed in the Rio Grande, but hopefully could be useful other places as well. And we're also working with the user groups with Trout Unlimited, doing volunteer days and some other fun stuff as a part of the project. So hopefully really engage the recreation community with this project. So thank you all.
Thanks, Emma. Any questions for Emma? Great, thank you.
Hi, nice to see you again. So I'm Hillary Cooper again, but I'm with Valley Floor Preservation Partners this time, not in my role as a county commissioner, just to be clear. Lance McDonald from the town of Telluride. So Valley Floor Preservation Partners in the town and several other partners in the Telluride region have been working on river restoration projects on this piece of property for a while. The Valley Floor outside of the town of Telluride, we've received your funding in the past for the first phase of this. This is the second phase. We received some funding from another fund for part of this project too. So we're very thankful for your support and your partnership on this project. It is a broadly supported project from the Telluride community. I think we have a lot of lessons to learn from the restoration that is going on. And we have a lot of lessons to learn from all of these projects really in future restoration efforts. So thanks for your support of these projects.
Yeah, I want to thank the CWCB in particular for the funding of the last project on phase one. It was, if you have an opportunity to go visit the site, please do. It's a project that was implemented, I thought, very well. We had very minimal impacts associated with the construction. This next project is going to be that times two. It's going to be very complicated. We have a lot of mine tailings that we're working with, but I'm glad that we took a few extra years to come up with this plan that you're considering today. I think it's resulting in a much better plan and will be much more protective of the environment in that area by pulling the river away from the tailings.
Thanks for being here. Just going and visiting Telluride, I've been impressed with the Valley Floor project so far, so it'll be really exciting to see what you guys do in this next phase and all the difference that it'll make for the water quality and mine reclamation. So
we're looking for a lot of volunteers in the field for this summer.
Trout Unlimited is TU apparently.
Well, TU's with us on this as well. So.
Does anybody have any questions for these folks? Director Hawkins.
Well, thanks for bringing this forward. I think that the first phase of this project was really a showcase project for the Southwest Basin, and I'm expecting this next phase to be as well. And I have heard that the supping has gotten much better since the first phase of the project, so maybe the board needs to go do a sup tour of this phase.
I'm a supper.
Yeah, the supping's actually starting to boom in Telluride, and a lot of it's because of the river project, which was totally unanticipated, but a good outcome.
Great, thank you.
Okay, just quickly, if you look at the slide there, you see that this recommendation and a recommendation within the agricultural category as well that's going to be partially funded through Environment and Rec is going to take us down to just under $1,000. So trying to make the best use of the money that we have, and we're very fortunate to have these applications come in. And staff recommends that the board approve the project's activities listed in the table on the memo for Colorado Water Plan grant funding, contingent upon the applicant's abilities to resolve issues and additional needs discussed in the memo.
Director Hawkins.
I had a request, and this is actually not just for you, Chris. When I was reviewing the water plants, I found it a little hard to find information about projects that were either approved for reduced funding or projects that were not approved for funding. And I noticed that in the ag category, there would be a blurb in the data sheet if the project was not approved for funding. And so I would like to make a request. It would be easier for me as a board member to either have some very short explanation in the memo or in the data sheet for projects, so that if I need to go look and see why a project wasn't approved, I've got just a little bit of information out of the committee review. Is that something that would be possible in the future?
Certainly.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm happy to discuss projects that weren't approved for or recommended for funding if that's what you'd like.
I didn't have any specific questions for you today.
Okay.
I was thinking for future review, it would just allow us to not have to take up time in front of the board if we had a specific question on a project.
Understood.
So thanks. And with that, I would move for approval of staff recommendation on items 29X through KK.
It's been moved by Director Hawkins and seconded by Director Yon to approve staff recommendation on items 29X through KK. And I would note that in Chris's recommendation, he had the additional issues and needs, so making sure those are included. Is there any discussion about the motion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And Chris, before you go, I wanted to thank you for your additional diligence. You know, I think the Education and Innovation grant has that extra scope of work because it's useful to have some extra detail and questions about on the ground activities, because so many of those projects are for programming and events and materials, and where you're dealing with so much construction. I think that your additional guidance and questions about floodplain considerations and construction is really appropriate and helpful. So thank you for taking the initiative on that. All right, we are on to agenda item 29, LL through PP, storage and supply with Anna.
Good afternoon, Anna Moss, CWCB staff for the record. So this is the storage and supply category. We started this fiscal year with $3 million available. I'm going into round 2. There was $2.65 million. We received 6 applications. There's just 5 listed in the table in the memo because one of them you heard already, the Julesburg Irrigation District did access $150,000 of the storage and supply money. So that was presented by Alex earlier, and you heard from Larry Frame on that also. So we had 3.1 million in request for that 2.65 available. So we had to cut just under $500,000, which was not really an easy task. So I'll quickly walk through the projects and where we decided to trim some of these. They were really all measured against sort of 2 objectives, which was either reducing the storage gap or the M&I gap. And that's really what the measure was for these. So the first application, LL, is from the Horno County Water Conservancy District. They have received funding for this project. They're part of the Guitarras Collaborative, and they've been looking at storage solutions within the basin. So they've been fairly systematic, first identifying some sites, came back and got a second WSRF grant to do some geotechnical investigation. This will help do some preliminary engineering to also tie in with that geotech work so they can really inform this further process, whether they should enlarge an existing reservoir or build a new one, or perhaps both. Potentially, this could add 2,170 acre feet. So we are recommending full funding for this. It was a small grant request, just under $17,000. The next one, Logan Irrigation District, item MM, you heard yesterday from
I just want to make sure that everyone knows we heard that yesterday, so I don't have to leave the room, correct?
And, yep.
Thank you.
And since we heard it and approved it yesterday, so it seems like Anna can say we heard it and approved it yesterday.
Okay.
Yes, and the only
Thank
thing I
you.
was going to note on that is really just tied to the funding reduction. That one requested 40%, 6% of the project in a grant. And so since we had to cut, we cut it down to about 44%. So it's on there only so you can see really what happened with all of the funding. But you're right, the action was taken yesterday. So there's no real discussion of the project today. The next one, North Fork Water Conservation District. They are the fiscal agent for the Delta Brick and Climate Company. So you heard about that project earlier today. We've heard about it a few times. It's the dredging of Paonia Reservoir to create the ceramic products. So this is more of a demonstration project. It was intended to be a 5-year effort. They requested a little over $300,000. And when we were looking at cutting projects, really the measurable result was only going to be 4 acre feet. And that wasn't a huge storage amount. And so we also looked to see where there was other funding opportunities. There was a little bit of money in the Engagement and Innovation Fund. And because this felt more demonstration than construction, we decided to take funds from both of those sources. So we did reduce it. So instead of a 5-year demonstration, it'll probably fund just the first few years. But I spoke with the applicant and he still feels as though we can get the information he needs from that first few years. So we're comfortable with that reduced funding. The next one, item 00, Delta Conservation District. This one we are not recommending, not that it's not a great project. It's Grand Mesa Reservoir Measurement Project. The real result of this was going to be 0 acre feet added, and that's why we're not recommending funding for this, in addition to the fact that we were just short on funds. What they were going to do is install gauge rods on a bunch of reservoirs on the Grand Mesa. Effectively, the district was going to then administer further grants to reservoir owners along the Mesa. And it just felt more of something that could be done at a local level, perhaps through the WSRF program, through the Basin Roundtable, just because it wasn't really adding new acre feet, trying to advance the goals of this bucket of money. And then the last one, there's no recommendation for this. It was Lower Arkansas Water Management Association to purchase West Farm Gravel Pit. This was a $1 million grant request paired with a $3.6 million loan request. Part of our loan and grant review is, especially when it comes to storage projects, we require feasibility studies. There's a lot of information in there, but certainly doesn't always have all the information we're looking for. As staff was reviewing this, a lot of questions and concerns were brought up to us from other folks in the basin. So we just felt that we couldn't make a solid recommendation at this time. So we wanted to delay decision right now while we can dig further into our review and come back to you at a future board meeting. So with that, I don't think there's anyone in the audience for storage. I'll double check. Nope. So if you've got questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Just a point of clarification, Anna, are you recommending on PP, is your staff recommendation to delay or do nothing?
Well,
both.
Yeah, both. The reason for just the delay was really related to the fact that I wasn't telling them they had to come back and reapply at a future round. So I guess my preference is just delay. And then if we choose to not recommend, we would bring that before you. So either way, I think you're going to see this in front of you again in the future, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Anna about the storage and supply projects? Director Yon?
Seeing none, I would move staff recommendation on agenda items 29LL through PP, excluding MM.
It's been moved by Director Yon and seconded by Director Trick to approve staff recommendation on items 29LL through PP, excluding MM. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Anna. Hello, Lauren.
Hello. Can you indulge me just one more minute? In addition to thanking all of the program managers, I also wanted to thank someone who has kept us organized and done a lot of grunt work in terms of putting together slides and tracking the incoming applications and making sure that all the program managers are on task, and that's Doug. So a big thank you to Doug. We so appreciate your work.
Director Yon.
I just wanted to say again, thank you to the staff for, sometimes you have to make hard decisions, and I really appreciate that you bring good projects to us and that you do good work in getting a lot of people involved so that you are making good decisions. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. And I think now that we are at the end of Water Plan Grant Day, everyone can agree how fun it is and exciting to go around the state. So now we are on to our final agenda item of the day, which is item 30, the Water Education Colorado Annual Scope of Work. Greg Johnson.
All right, Greg Johnson, CWCB staff. Last item of the day, agenda item 30, is the annual review and approval of not the Colorado Foundation for Water Education, the Water Education Colorado, WECO. So as you all know very well, WECO was the new name, rebranded for the whole organization a couple of years ago. They have been doing wonderful work, continuing to do wonderful work since 2002. Since 2002, CWCB has supported Water Education Colorado with an annual appropriation from the non-reimbursable grant in the construction fund. So this is an automatic non-reimbursable grant that comes out of the construction fund every year in the amount of $150,000 currently. That is, of course, subject to change by the board. We do recommend, staff recommends approval of this 2020 scope of work for the fiscal year 2020 for WECO. This scope of work is broken into 3 different overarching tasks. So organizational development, water education and leadership program support, and water information program support. The table summarizing all of this information was in the board packet. Jayla Poppleton, the executive director of WECO, has just handed out the full document with all the backup material as well. So again, staff recommendation is for approval of this scope of work. A lot has gone into this. This has certainly evolved over the years, but again, Water Education Colorado does continue to do wonderful work. I did want to bring to your attention quickly that Director Hawkins received the Emerging Leader Award last week, a couple weeks ago, I guess. So congrats again to Director Hawkins, in addition to Jennifer Pitt from the Audubon Society receiving the President's Award, the Diane Hoppy Memorial Award. So with that, I will turn it over to Jayla Poppleton to discuss some of the details.
Thank you, Greg, and greetings, board directors. It's good to be with you here today. I hope that you find WECO CWCB scope allocation as exciting as Water Plan Day.
Jayla, before you get going, can you introduce yourself for the record and for
Yes.
our online listeners?
Yes, Jayla Poppleton, Executive Director at Water Education, Colorado. Thank you. So each year we come before the board in May to report out on the past year's activities and to share with you an overview of how we plan to use the funding support that we get through the projects bill for the coming year. So that's what I'm here to do. I did not prepare a presentation, just knowing that the time that I had on the agenda was pretty short, so I'm going to keep it brief and then save time for any questions that you might have about what we're recommending here today. So just as a reminder, when we were founded by the state legislature in 2002, this base funding allocation was made through the annual projects bill, as Greg reviewed. At the beginning, in the early days of the Colorado Foundation for Water Education, that constituted nearly all of our budget. And I'm proud to say that as of this year, in the FY 2020 budget, that funding allocation is 16% of our total revenue, as we've increasingly grown our staffing, our programming, and diversified our funding sources. So I'm going to introduce what we're proposing today and then also review similar activities that we completed in 2019 that supported the scope of work. And several of our board members are here, which includes Greg Johnson. He has one of the CWCB board seats, as well as Lauren Riss, and Amy Moyer, who was here earlier, sits on our board as a DNR staff person. Chris Treese is also here, and Brian Werner from our board. So the first task that we propose is under organizational development. It's membership growth support. And in our 17th year, we now have almost 600 members, and they're comprised of both individuals and organizations. And it's a very important aspect of our revenue. It's flexible, it's dependable, it's consistent. We are expecting to end the current fiscal year with a 10% growth in the total revenue coming from membership dues. And our goal for next year is another 5%. We hired a full-time development coordinator in January. Meg Meyer joined our team. And with that, we're planning to focus more on member engagement and new member recruitment through innovative strategies, including an ambassador program where we can tap people in the community that believe in our mission, who can be going out and advocating for the value of supporting our work through membership. In addition to that, we plan to attend at least one roundtable meeting in each of the basins to talk about our current programs and to recruit new members and participation from roundtable members who we feel are a really key audience for our programs. Moving on. We also plan to incorporate more general public outreach. These are events that don't fit under our traditional education and leadership and water information and content program areas. Last year, we hosted 3 events in this category, and that included a water stewardship panel in front of the Denver Chamber of Commerce and their infrastructure committee, which has 85 members. We focused on ways that businesses can be investing through their model in stewarding water resources. We also hosted a public-focused event on water reuse in October in partnership with Water Reuse Colorado, and we had almost 70 people come out to learn about what are the opportunities and where does that fit into the overall context of water supply in Colorado. And then in March, we hosted a Two Forks retrospective looking back at the rise and fall of a major water supply project in the late 1980s and early 1990s and how that's affected the trajectory of water planning in the metro area up till today. We had 175 people attend that event at the History Colorado Museum. So this year, we plan to continue participating in part as an engagement partner for Tap In. I serve on the advisory committee, and we're planning to support any activities that do come out of that project. And then we're also exploring the possibility with that group of leading the delivery of one Tap-In sponsored event focused on helping people understand how they can be more innovative in water. We also plan to convene a series of 2 to 3 meetings that would revisit the successes of the Water 2012 campaign, which we led, working with a wide coalition of partners across the state, drawing more attention to water. And we are aiming for a similar effort in partnership with the CWCB and others in 2022, which we think is a really great year to celebrate the centennial of the Colorado River Compact and other anniversaries, including our own 20th anniversary. We also will be allocating some dollars to organizational management, finishing updating our strategic plan, which was last updated in 2014, and conducting a traditional financial review that we'll use to report out to our supporters. Then moving into our in-person educational and leadership program support offerings, we have dollars allocated to the Water Fluency Program, which is going into its 5th year. We already have the 2019 program set up. We're currently hosting registration. We cap the class at 35 participants, and we focus on non-water professionals and giving them an in-depth overview of the institutional framework and the legal setting for water management and the challenges that we're facing moving forward and what some of the innovative approaches are for addressing those challenges. We plan to finish hosting that class between July and September in the Denver metro area, and then to begin preparing for the 2020 program in the Southwest Basin. We're really excited to move to that corner of the state for our 6th year. There's also an allocation toward the Water Leaders program. Water Leaders is actually going into its 12th year. Some of our Water Leaders alumni are sitting at this table, which makes me really giddy. We also have water leaders who have come before you today at this podium to present some of their grant requests. There's more than 150 graduates out in our community. We're currently offering the 2019 session. The class this year will be going to Redstone for their 2nd session next Monday and Tuesday. So in this scope, we will finish hosting the 2019 program and move into opening registration and beginning the first half of the 2020 program with another cohort of 16 individuals. We have our Water Educator Network that was formed in 2014, and since then we've had more than 105 different water educators from around the state participate in the program as members. And we've also served a wide variety of non-members in different trainings and convenings to inform their work and advance their capacity to serve their target audiences. This year, we received a grant through the Colorado Water Plan Grant Fund to develop a water education action plan in support of one of the goals in the water plan. And we are nearly completed with that project. We expect to finalize it in August. And then this task would be to begin prioritizing activities and initiating implementation, working with the Water Educator Network. Tours are another historic popular program that we have. We have our annual River Basin tour, which last year visited the Rio Grande Basin, and this year we'll be headed to the Lower South Platte, June 17th and 18th. We're really excited about the opportunity to bring legislators, especially the Interim Water Resources Review Committee, out on that tour to interact with water professionals in the field and also interested citizens, and to get an immersive experience looking at water challenges locally. So this year we'll produce the June tour as part of our 2019 scope, but then looking ahead to next year, we'll be going to the Arkansas River Basin. And then we also plan to work with local partners to keep growing and multiplying our Urban Waters bike tours, which started in Denver. Last year, we took them to Fort Collins, and this year we'll continue hosting the Denver tour, one in Fort Collins, and also go to Colorado Springs. Those are unique in that they're free and target the public and students, and so we get to interact with a lot of new folks. And then quickly moving into water information program support. This focuses on the way that Headwaters magazine interfaces with some of our complementary content that includes our radio program, Connecting the Drops, our Your Water Colorado blog, as well as webinars that we produce following the publication of each issue of Headwaters. So this year, we published 3 issues focusing on some of the things that are priorities in the water plan, including water reuse, climate change, and more efficient permitting processes. That issue will come out in July. We'll finish it at the end of June. And then moving into next year, we'll host those complementary content pieces building off of that permitting subject matter. And then move into 3 new topics, which include for the fall, the Colorado River Basin Drought Plan effort. And then in the winter, an environmental justice topic. And then going into next spring, early summer, aging water infrastructure. And then we will also be reprinting one of our citizens guides to keep it current. Our library currently contains 9 citizens guides to different water topics, and the Interstate Compacts Guide is in its 2nd edition. It was published last in 2015, and we are almost out of stock. So we're proposing just a simple task to restock our shelves so we can continue supplying that to people who are interested in learning more about our compacts. And then finally, we will be adding a section to our website that we think is a really important kind of first landing place for people who are new to water to come get a broad overview of just a wide array of water topics that will also point them to complementary resources both within our site and off-site to learn more. And that will be kind of a water encyclopedia on our website. So that completes my overview, and I'm open to answering any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Jayla. Are there any questions, Director Hawkins?
Thank you, Jayla. I don't have any questions. I did want to say that this was one of the tightest scopes of works that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of them, so nice work on it.
Any other questions or comments? Director Jan.
Thanks, Jayla. And thanks for all your work you're doing on this Lower South Platte and coming out with us and driving around. We had a good time, so it was.
We had a great time.
It
Thank
was
you for
fun.
hosting us.
But if there's no more questions, I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 30.
It's been moved by Director Jan and seconded by Director Trick to approve staff recommendation on item 30. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Jayla.
So much. If I may, before I give up the microphone, Greg Johnson mentioned that we awarded Director Hawkins with our Emerging Leader Award, and we did not have her actual award, which I have with me today, and I'd love to present it to her now in front of you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very cool. Especially like enjoying Director Mitchell waiting way.
Very cool. Thank you, Jayla. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? No, we're just going to hang out. Okay, great. Director Goebel.
I move to adjourn.
It's been moved by Director Goebel and seconded by Director Jan to adjourn the May 2019 meeting of the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. No,
Aye.
we don't have to vote? Oh, great. All those opposed, motion carries. Great. Thank you, everyone. It's so great to see you and so great to see all the great work. See you in July.